Well, welcome everybody into our I think that Josh the second Great Lakes Poetry Festival.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was pretty early.
It's very early on. We had Kathleen Freeman. Oh, see, it's been a day. We've had Kathleen on Tuesday night. We were the second poetry this week. So anyway, welcome everybody to Public Library. My name is Marty Atkins. I'm the program coordinator for the library. I'm so excited to have Josh or J.J. Brinski. That's his writer's number 2, shall we say?
I don't know what that means in French.
Yeah, it's French. So it's just French. You know. Anyway, I'm so glad to have you here as part of the Great Lakes Poetry Festival. I do have to thank one of the friends of Peter White Library provide the live streaming equipment. So if you are watching YouTube land, I know that Josh said that there were his friends that were tuning in tonight. You can thank the friends of Peter White Library for that. I'm just going to let you know a couple things that are coming in the next week or so. Saturday, starting at 1 p.m., in partnership with the Peninsula Environmental Coalition, there's going to be a meeting right across the hallway in the Shivers Room at 1 p.m. That's Wild Voices of the Wild EP. There are, I believe, about 7 poets who are going to be reading poems about nature and the environment. So I really encourage you to come to that. It starts at 1 p.m. In the Shivers Room. And then next Wednesday, we have North Words and Music. And that is a show that we do probably every 3 months or so with writer B.J. Bradley and a few of his friends, me, I guess you would call me friends. We do poems, we do skits, we do storytelling, and also we have great music. The musicians this time are house band. We call them our house band because they've been doing it a while. Big Lake Acoustic. And we also have a musician, John Mallow, who's going to be there. And also Mr. Edwards from the Children's Museum will be there to participate in the May. So I really encourage you to show up next Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. right here at the community room at Peter White Public Library. So I'm just going to do a very short introduction for my friend Josh. So Josh is a poet flash fiction writer living in Marquette, right here on the wild shores of Lake Superior. I love what he writes here. He does life with his talented white race. And four growing daughters, and writes in the community with the rabbit flash fiction magic. And he spends most of his time loving space, theology, collecting typewriters, riding his bike ridiculous distances and making up words, and also playfully arguing about Star Wars. So I love that. And I just want to read this one quote that I found an interview that you did. Oh no! I was like, I don't know what you're saying here. I sympathize because I do interviews and I forget that I do them and I can't remember what I say. But this is really wonderful. And it's just what I think it's sort of his credo of what poetry is. So he said in this interview, I believe that poetry is one of the purest ways to observe the world and tell the truth about it. Both it and ourselves. Being my chosen craft since high school and BA in writing is the written word to tell the greatest, hardest, most colorful, or most horrible things I know. Poetry looks us straight in the eye. Poetry won't let us get away with crafted persona or made-up landscapes in this human experience. It beckons us to tell about it, and use your best. So please give a warm welcome to J.J. Brinski, Josh Brindle. Yes, right here. Let me do that. That might
By the way, Marty, there's absolutely no way I said any of what you said. I don't want to find that.
It's right here.
If it's on
If it's on the paper, if it's on the internet, it must be true. Yeah, Abraham said that. Wow, that was like, man, I don't know who I was channel today. Who I was thinking about that stuff. I do agree with it. That's good. Do you usually agree with what you've said recently in the past? Well, hello guys. My name is Josh Brindle. I do go by the good name Brinski, so if you see that is me. Back there, I was in nicknames from college, on the Sound of Jazz, you have a regular name. We all have problems with identity, so leave me alone. So I haven't done this in a hot minute. I did just get back from a poetry tour. There's not a better name for it, really. I had a couple creative conferences, events to go to, that groups that I'm a part of in North Carolina, Nashville. And so I had a friend that teaches pottery and art school in Memphis, had me come down and made for you money. You're like, well, I guess I should do this. So yeah, they paid for some of my trip, my rental car and some things, and I built that into a little bit more of a trip. I do typewriter poetry on the spot at a lot of markets, and now bookshops and a lot of coffee shops. Yeah, if you guys know a bookshop or a coffee shop anywhere that would have let me know for my next soiree and some poetry tour. That was really fun. It was a good time to connect with friends, artist friends. Like I said, I know a guy he's a master potter. And to have a guy that's a pottery guy that absolutely loves poetry, we're going to do some collab stuff. He wants me to stamp and embed a poem into some of his mugs that he makes. So we're gonna try a pottery poetry collab. But yeah, so I'm coming off of that, so that's probably why I'm half sick. I haven't slept in 3 days, and I'm a little ragged right now. But I'm always excited. For anyone to show up and listen to some words that I might want to share. I will say that if you've read any of my poetry, especially my last book was spacious and advantageous and cosmic and huge, and this is just the littlest. This is literally the littlest book you can print from Ingram Spark, and it was written in the littlest amount of time. It was written literally in 4 days, and Marty, I think it was 2 years ago, he was like, hey, we do this international chapbook challenge. Can you try to write an entire chapbook, like 30, 40 poems in 4 days? And I was like, that sounds like a challenge. I kind of like little prompts like that where I don't have to set the thing up myself. I just have to get a basic prompt and then go for it. And so if you pick this book up, I think it's got 32, 34 poems in it, maybe 36 poems. Some even number in the 30s poems. You guys are welcome to hang out with poetry. Okay, see you later. There's some people out there looking. But yeah, I did the rough draft of this was done and then edited over a day and a half, and I had a few of my good writer friends waiting in the wings. I was like, hey, can I send this to you and just find like the major edits? And then it went into the competition. Well, Marty gets a hold of me a couple months later. I obviously didn't win anything in that competition, and I if you hear some of these poems, you might see why. And that's totally cool. I knew that I was doing something that was off the wall. I referred to this as literally off the top of my head. I wouldn't allow myself to think very much about what I was doing. I know that might sound bad for poetry, but I was really trying to get something that just came out quick and that was like kind of reactionary. I had Marty, by the way, I've already blamed all this on you, just so you know. I basically had the prompt. I think it was the human animal was the entire prompt for this. So when you look at this, you'll see that every poem has an animal in it. If you look at the titles, there's frog thrower, who told the horse's back to fit a sitting human, does the cheetah envy the sports car, stuff like that. So there's going to be an animal. And so basically my one goal I gave myself was to have each one be about a different animal, and how we interact or see that animal and how that affects us. Just a human animal understanding, an interface, just to give me whatever idea came up. And some of them were silly, little, punchy, 1-2 line poems, and other ones I kind of got into a little bit. It also was affected by some of the things I was reading and watching at the time. So you'll see movie references, there's some biblical references, and some other stuff just came out of the crazy stuff going on in his head. So I'm going to start and read us a couple poems. I'm going to read the title poem, just called, the whole book is called Beasts of Our Burdens, Ballads of Wing and Hoof. I wanted a tiny book with a huge title that barely fits on the cover, and I think I got that done. So I'm going to read the first poem I'm going to read is called Beasts of Our Burdens. Or it might just be called, it's Beast of Our Burdens. And this is where the name ended up coming from. But it is about the ox. Beast of Our Burdens. Oh, the odes the ox would sing in those days of pulling carts and bearing the laborious loads we men couldn't carry ourselves. Wear heavy weights, anchor-sized agriculture, in bushel and buttload, basket and bale. With plethora pull, you towed amidst our cursing, workaday endeavors, rarely appreciated. You bore the heft of our sin and slight. You lapped the sweat off our brows. You were most often overworked for our breadwinning and bacon-making. No wonder you rumbled slow. No wonder your head hung low. That's Beast of Our Burdens. And next, if you flip the page in the book, you get to see some wonderful pig coming out of a cannon art. So this is called, and you'll see the juxtaposition of the humorous, hilarious, and then the heavy in this collection. This is called Pigs Really Can't Fly. Pigs really can't fly unless you shoot them out of a pig cannon. But who in their right budgetary mind would spend money to manufacture those? They're probably 3 times as expensive as a shoulder-mounted mongoose launcher. On the other pig's foot, though, what army wouldn't be caught off guard by soaring and splattering pigs on the battlefield? What a way to go, smashed by a cannoned hog. I don't know, maybe I'm onto something. So that's Pigs Really Can't Fly. Now this next one, if you get to know me at all, you will know that I have a penchant for biblical scripture and sacred writing, and I definitely play in the weird parts of the Bible. I love the minor prophets, which if you can name more than 2 minor prophets, I'll give you something. Yeah, don't do that, right? So it was, again, some of this stuff was literally off the top of my head, and I don't know. I had just read either an article or actually read something that referenced this verse, and it was kind of rattling around in my ears as I was writing some of the other poems. And this is an obscure verse from Amos 3:12. I'll quote the verse first. It says, "As the shepherd snatches 2 legs or a piece of an ear from the lion's mouth," and then it follows on after that. But so I just called this poem 2 legs, a piece of an ear. The prophet Amos used this grisly visual to highlight a pronounced plunder coming upon his wayward kids as an enemy surrounded them. Sometimes, as a shepherd would salvage the scant, bloody pieces of a beloved sheep from the hunger-stricken mouth of a lion. I have to ask, why? What good is that? You probably aren't going to hang on to legs and ears as keepsakes. That sheep is gone. But I guess if the Lord is our shepherd, maybe knows something about DNA, he could make a whole new sheep from scraps, just like those scientists are trying to do with the mammoth. I don't know. He's a sucker for resurrections. So the next one, this is one of my favorites. It was literally written on my back deck. It's called To the Shiny Bluish Ant. And that's A-N-T, not A-U-N-T. I don't know if anybody has a blue ant. Maybe a blue-haired ant. I'm stalling because I can't find it. Hold on. Let's see here. Put everything in all caps so it's harder to read. I don't know why I can't. There it is. 41. This is a shorty. All right. Yeah, so this is written on my back deck. And if you're like me, when it finally gets warm enough, to be on your back deck, you are out there with 600,000 of your favorite tiny friends that also bite you and land on you and try to carry you off into the woods and eat you. So this is called To the Shiny Bluish Ant. To the shiny bluish ant, I just thoughtlessly flicked off of my wrist onto the patio chair next to me, sailing through the air at 111 mile an hour for what must have seemed like 50 yards to you. That had to have been one hell of a ride. And also, I really hope you are all right and or have good ant insurance. So again, like if you're looking for all the way deep, not the collection, but there's a few heavy numbers in here, but I really, with that in mind, I really feel like poetry has been typecast. Can anybody can I get an amen? I mean, it's like one of those things where when I was in school, one thing that put me off of staying in academia and going on to get my master's degree was that people took themselves far too seriously when it came to their poetry. And again, I love the craft. I love the history of poetry. I love the classics in poetry. But I also like a Billy Collins, or I love people that, I love Dr. Seuss. I mean, he's still one of my most influential writers because he played with words. He played with language. And whenever I start to see a little bit of wordplay, a little fiddly diddly, something where you're having fun with words. And so, I hope that is allowable. But I do really appreciate being able to go from, just the light into the heavy realm of life, of words, of everything. So, all right, this next one's called The Fawn That Limps. Probably a little bit on the heavier end here. This was from a real observation that I had. I think we had a doe that had, this would have been 2 years ago, had a doe that had triplets. So it had 3 little fawns, and they were in our yard. They would even sleep in our yard sometimes. And I always feel fortunate to have any of our woodland animals down Silver Creek Road and Harvey just kind of camping out. I've had that. I've got another poem in here about 17 turkeys, and I saw them in like a Baptist 15-passenger van, and I don't know why, but that's in here too. So, hold on to your butts. You'll get to read that at some point if you buy the book. But this is called The Fawn That Limps because one of the fawns at some point, I don't know if it slipped on the road. I don't know if it got hit by a car, but it was limping pretty badly. And it was just kind of the observance of watching the other deer kind of like allow for the slowness of this limping fawn. They ended up, I think, doing okay because I saw them much later in the year, and they were all a little bit bigger, and that the limping fawn was still with the bunch. So, The Fawn That Limps. You carry trauma outboard, hobbled by a car, hurried humanity, or slipping on the asphalt, ribboned hard and slick after the rain. Not made for your hooves, but for the quickened expenditures of our lives as we scramble to live them. And there, I see you struggle to walk as your twin sister and mother that I've witnessed this entire summer. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Unlike you, or unlike us, you get no physical therapy, no wheelchair, no mercy. Just walk it off. I don't know what kind of mindset I was in on that one, but it took a turn on me. And then I have 2 more quickies out of the book, but I do want to share. I'm going to call this a B-side of this collection, which did not. I actually wrote this after this collection was done, but thought that it would have fit. And I'll be really honest. One of the reasons why I wanted to read this poem tonight is because it was in my ragged scraping to kind of give some words to our cultural moment and our political moment, and I just wanted to put some words to that, and it had another animal image. It's called 2 Tons of Raven's Feathers. And this gets into a little bit more of my wordplay, which I'm always really happy when I can get a poem out like this. Also not edited, so just give me some room. The bulletless bedlam of the runaway train, the gish gallop and goreless gore of heartless good, and the inhumanity of efficiency. Ramrod, slipshod, strategy and uncorked chaos. Evil is phasing far faster than we can react. The onslaught of 2 tons of black feathers, hard plucked from ravens, in flight, falling relentlessly, blocking out the merciful sun. Thank you. That one was a bit dark. But, and now for one of my, what I've been told is one of people's favorites from the 50 to 100 folks that have supported this book. I put out a little tiny Kickstarter to get this out before Christmas, which was a daring endeavor. But I did. I had a lot of folks come through from a couple of my writing groups and from town here. But this next one is called Walrus Farts. 33 is the page number. I tried to put the bookmarks in here and it just got cluttered. So this is a true story, okay? One of the greatest audial joys in this life is the fat-flapping flatulence of a sea of sunning walruses ripping ass. And if you've never heard this, that's the end of the poem. There you go. If you've never heard a YouTube or watched a YouTube video of a bunch of sunning walruses farting, it's incredible. The sound alone is absolutely incredible. So they say you never know if God has a sense of humor. It's like, watch this. hold my beer, my last one is probably one of my favorite and most the most difficult poem I had to write in this collection was a poem about a red fox that I saw that was dead on the side of the road. And as I just got done traveling over like 11, 12 states in this country, I saw far more animals than just dead deer like you would see in the Upper Peninsula. And I don't know why, but as I've gotten older, I hate to see an animal that's just dead on the side of the road. Like there's just it's like a scene of trauma, And I remember I saw a deer on Shiras Hill because I come in from Harvey a lot. And I saw a deer that had just been hit, and it's obviously its back 2 legs or, its hips were out, and it was just, in pain and writhing. And I saw just as I came back and forth to town that, a police officer had stopped and I think probably put it out of its misery. But just watching that happen. But I remember one time in almost the same spot as I saw that deer, there was a red fox, and it had been hit by a car. But its tail was just kind of like, and you know how beautiful a red fox's tails are, and there's an amber fox, there's all kinds of different foxes with different kind of coloring and printing, but like just that regular red fox, and I saw that tail up in the air, and it was like kind of waving goodbye of its own beauty, and from its own beauty. So that's what inspired this poem. And if you see this poem, it's formatted kind of in like a wave, or like it kind of stair steps down the entire page. And it was really hard to get it formatted right the way I wanted. I had to change words and lines and just get everything that way. I do like working with some visual formatting. I loved E. Cummings when I was in college. And so if you've ever read E. Cummings' stuff, and there's a few others out there that'll really kind of play with the words on the page. So, and I kind of want to do that more, I think, in the future. But this is called, and forgive me for my voice being quite ragged. I'm going to take a drink of tea before we do this. While I'm doing this, does anybody have any questions? You can ask me anything. That's a dangerous thing to say, but. Well, red foxes should get human funerals for their color alone. That's the full title. If you've ever seen a fox dead on the road, the sight alone tells you something is mightily wrong within this earth. A crimson salt, seeping red, pooling like syrup, a common signal of liquid death leaking, a warm life leaving, not this amber fire fur socked in black, black-tailed in a fine garnet. How could death be so flaggingly beautiful? This true majesty, fair-throated, scurrying like some wily, arrested spirit we seldom giftedly witness, sans forest. That is, red foxes should get human funerals for their color alone. I had a lot of fun writing this. I think that's about all that I had for the evening. Marty, anything else?
I'm just wondering when your book of Star Wars poems are coming out.
Oh, so I have it. Yeah. So Marty just sits down next to me one time. You get me going on Star Wars. It's a fateful endeavor. He said, I think we were talking at the Art on the Bayou, and he said, I've always wanted to write a book of Star Wars poems. And I'm like, I've always wanted to write a book of Star Wars poems. And so I started writing some Star Wars tonkas and haikus, I think, a few years back, and I kind of abandoned that endeavor. But I think there's a chapbook of Star Wars poems in me, for sure. So, yeah, if I get coaxed or prodded, or maybe just...
You know what? You and I should do it together. You could be the dark side, and I'll be the light side.
I get to be the dark side. All right. Okay. Yeah, we might have to do that. Yeah. And then, but we both get to write a couple of gray, the gray poems as well. So yeah. Yeah, so I do write poetry regularly. If you're ever looking for me in town, I'll be down at a lot of the Saturday and almost all of the Wednesday night farmers markets, and that's where I do poems right on the spot. It's really cool in that atmosphere. I get a lot of questions about this, so I might as well explain this now, and then I'll wrap it up. But one of the things I get to do, I believe that, and I have some pieces that say this on my table, but poetry is for the people, and I like to take poetry out to people. I think a lot of people often will look at poetry as this, this very solitary thing that people do in smoky, dark rooms up in a corner. It's very academic, intellectual, and also lonely, I don't know, but am I the only guy that had that in my mind at some point of like writers, have to be all by themselves a lot, and they're kind of esoteric, and they keep to themselves. But I started realizing as I got out in the world, there's a lot of different types of writers and poets, just like there are lots of different types of people. So in my, I'm an Enneagram 4, if you know what that is. It's very outward, very friendly. I like to get out and get in front of people, and I like to do things with people. I'm very, relational in that way. And so I wanted poetry to be a little bit more relational. And as I started collecting typewriters, I started finding a few people that did typewriter poetry, and a lot of them do street poetry. And what's nice about a mechanical typewriter is you can sit at a little table or at a bench or at a market, and you could just make a poem right there. And it's challenging, as many poets and writers would tell you, because a lot of people do not want to give work away that they literally just made up on the spot. And so it's been really a sharpening tool for a lot of my craft, a lot of my word usage. I try not to recycle words and images. And I mean, some of them, you can only write about a lake so many times, And I always get the people that I'll say, give me a couple prompts. What would you like? I ask people, what do you need words for in your life? So, a lot of people are very curious, come to the table. I usually have a little banner in front of the table that says, let me type you a poem. And I get a lot of people, so how does this work? Do you just copy a poem that you've already written, or do you have a few that you've memorized and you just pick one out of a hat? And I was like, no, we're going to make up a poem for you on the spot. I just feel it's a great writing exercise for me, and it's a way for me to, just sharpen that and also interact with people. And so it's really interesting finding what people need or want poems for. If you've ever seen Ethan Hawke's famous video he's done the last few years about describing poetry to people. He's like, nobody really wants to read Allen Ginsberg's poems or, wants to read Thoreau or Whitman or anybody before their dad dies, or they have their heart broken, or their life takes a major shift, or they have to move, and all of a sudden they feel like words aren't adequate for the feelings and the thoughts, the emotions of what they're dealing with. And they said that's when you engage with poetry. And so it's really interesting finding, I meet college kids that are away from home for the first year of their life. I meet people that lost their grandma last week. I meet people that really, really want me to write a poem about their wood stove, which I like wood stoves, so that one was really fun. I've written poems about ninjas, Godzilla, werewolves, rocks, rock hunting, finding agates, stuff glowing in the dark, all cryptids, all kinds of things. And so it's a really, really fun way to engage with a craft that I don't really feel is always, there's not really a lot of performance elements to poetry aside from spoken word or a reading. So it's been a fun thing to have that kind of creativity and that craft happen in front of folks. So so that's what I kind of do on the regular. That's what I just got done doing on this tour that I just did over. I went from North Carolina through Nashville, through Tennessee, Arkansas, Kansas, Oklahoma, and then all the way back up through Chicago and home. So I covered a lot of ground, but it's been really cool to see that and how it engaged with people all over the country. So I've been coming off of a lot of, I think I'm a little drained in my brain as far as my words go, but I do firmly believe as well, and I'll close with this, that when you're being creative, you can kind of train your creativity muscles just like anything else. You can kind of, train yourself to paint better by painting regularly. You can train yourself to probably be a better orator or actor as you're rehearsing lines, you're really getting into your craft. And when COVID happened, I had the opportunity to go back to writing every day, every other day. And so it's been cool for that this has led me to here. So thanks guys for everybody who came. Thanks for Marty and Beth for all you guys do. These guys are all the time everywhere at the stuff here. And I'm always excited to see what's going to happen for Poetry Month. So it's going to be a good one. And yeah, that's about all I have. Anybody have any other questions?
What was your favorite stop on your journey?
What was my favorite stop? So I got to go to an art, faith, and culture conference called The Breath and the Clay. It was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And there were people from literally all over the world there. People from Australia, Germany, England, and a host of other countries. And one of the most eclectic groups of people I think I've ever been around. I mean, you'll see people, they have like set dances that are going on. So dancing, a lot of really good, they do kind of a TED Talk style conference speaking. And so you get instead of getting one person for a half an hour, you just get a bunch of 15, 20-minute talks. And so they're kind of really punchy and quick and to the point. But it also just a wide variety. Good musicians that were there. John Mark McMillan was there. It was just extraordinary to be kind of getting out and about and sampling creativity and art in its many forms and many places. So that was a special time for sure. Yeah, I think that's about all I got. Thanks. I do have quite a few things for sale back there. This is just kind of my usual setup for a market. I have typewritten bookmarks and buttons. I have handmade journals or hand-stamped journals and a bunch of books. So if you would like to look, and this one I do have for sale. Thanks.